Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everyone. This is one of those things that you don't hear often in a podcast, but so important for so many families. Today, we're going to talk about adoption and some of the things that come along with that, some of the positive aspects, some of the challenges, some of the, and I'm going to say that word, we've said it before, some of the traumas connected to it. But then again, we all have traumas from our childhood. It doesn't matter if you were adopted or not. And those little things that float in your subconscious that pilot you as an adult. We're going to dig in all of that, but through the eyes of adoption. She's an amazing psychotherapist with so much insight for individuals, couples, families, teens, and children. And it's so great to have her back with us, Susie Engel, on the program today. How is everything by you?
Everything is great, Steve. How are you?
Good.
That's good.
I have friends who have adopted children, and
Yeah.
I look at their journey, whether I was part of the journey in the beginning or even years later, hearing some of those things, how life is, family life, what it was like maybe for those children. And one of the first things that I think that many adopted children deal with, and maybe even as adults, is identity struggles. Do you think that's part of it?
Yeah, I think that sometimes adopted children are not exposed to their roots or heritage. Sometimes they're not allowed to know that for legal purposes, if it's domestic issues here in the States. And then they wonder where did I come from? What's my history? For us, we, in general, if we're not adopted, we grew up with intergenerational stories and ancestry. And some children or adults who have been adopted don't have that backdrop. So the identity question is a big one. And then there's all sorts of things about, not things, but issues that may internalize for individuals who are adopted of what's the nature of this? Why was I given away? Maybe it was out of loving decisions. Maybe it was out of danger. Maybe it was out of, abuse and neglect, and somebody had to save these children from those situations. So it gets complicated. Right?
More so than I think we realize, and that's why we're digging into it today. And I got to imagine too, those feelings surface at different stages in life. It's not just a child. You could be an adult and then have that realization one day triggered by something, maybe a family discussion, maybe another family's discussing something, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm not connected to my birth family. And then it's like, whoa, everything was fine until, I had that realization.
Yeah, and I think that there's probably an underlying sense that starts, I used the word internalizing a minute ago, but starts getting fortified or reinforced. So it becomes, at one extent, it becomes an existential question. Who am I? When we're talking about identity, who am I? Where did I come from? What are my genetics? What's this and what's that? Now, people have a lot of access now with 23andMe and all sorts of DNA testing to be able to understand a little bit more. But it's complicated because parents who adopt, they have a different motivation. They want to build a family, and the child is wondering, where do I fit? Where do I belong? Who am I? And then it becomes, there's a lot of tension in attachment, which is hard. And it's a good story to be adopted. It's a good thing. The trauma isn't I'm adopted. The trauma is what happened before all of that. And where is my imagination or stress response taking me? What narrative am I writing about or scripting about? Or do my adoptive family or parents, I should say, feel comfortable if I ask questions. Who were my birth parents? Where did I come from? Can I look for them? Are they comfortable or are they threatened? So it becomes a very interesting, um, an interesting hotbed
Dynamics. Yeah. Yeah.
for issues.
So it's my belief as life goes on, especially in the last couple of years, I believe that we all suffer from grief. We have it,
Yeah.
over years. What is grief? Grief is loss, and all different shapes and form. Whether you realize it or not, you could have lost a job maybe years ago, but that was kind of your identity. You might be grieving that. You get older, don't move around the same way. Loss of mobility. There's some grief there. I'm not being negative.
No, it's the fact.
I
It's
view
a
it that
truth.
way. So
Yeah.
that said, you look at it both ways in an adoptive situation where the birth parents may be grieving the loss of parenting, and then you have the children who are adopted, beautiful as it is, there might be some grief there because of the loss of connection to their birth family, right? So that those things are all
Beautiful.
floating around over there.
Yeah. So if it's a domestic situation, whether it's foster care or, a child coming from foster care, there's usually a buffer from that. Sometimes adoptive parents don't legally have the right to know the birth parents. Depends on what phase of the legal system everybody is at, because sometimes birth parents' rights are terminated before any thought, or not thought, but readiness for adoption. Um, but international adoptions, a lot of times parents go to different countries around the world, whether it's South America, Central America. For a long time, Russia was huge about having Americans adopt or Europeans adopt, or China,
Mm.
especially with the one child law. And a lot of times, whether it's domestic or international, adoptive parents see the birth parents relinquish their baby. And it is trauma. It's like this joy that we were anticipating, this reproductive story in a way, is not playing out the way I expected it.
Mm.
And the parents who are giving up the child, relinquishing the child for adoption, they've probably gone through 9 months of stress with pregnancy, making decisions. Maybe they'll get kicked out of their village that they depend on for life or death. Maybe it's economic reasons, maybe it's political reasons that they're giving up, relinquishing their baby. So the baby in utero is also experiencing grief, stress, loss already, let alone they're bonding with the birth mother. They develop hearing at least in the second and third trimesters in utero. So they hear extended family, they hear the environment, and then they're born and handed to a stranger. That's like a shock to the little baby system too, even if they go to an orphanage and live there for many years before adoption. So it's just incredible. And we have to be able to speak about this, because the adoptive parents often are not educated or exposed to these possibilities of this complex trauma that's already
Mm.
handed to them. Like the baby's already shocked.
We're going deeper here, but I'm glad we are. And for those that don't have this on their radar, we're talking about things that children, babies, even before they're born, experience, and that charts their future. Like, for example, let's say you have two birth parents, right? They're your parents, except when the baby, before being born, they were fighting. They were fighting.
Yes,
That child is
that's
experiencing that trauma because they're hearing it. They're hearing the mother's attention, blood pressure going up,
Heart,
all of that.
heart rate,
Heart rate. Yeah. Yeah.
breath, change of breath. And also, when we as people, it doesn't matter what age, when we're in stress response, and we've talked a little bit about this, the alarm system turns on. And I always point back here, it's that deep subcortical part of our brain, the primitive brain, the lizard brain. You and I have spoken about it,
Sure.
where it's like fight, flight, freeze. Well, when that turns on, the brain also lets drops stress hormones into our system so
Mm,
we can run or fight or freeze beyond our capabilities.
yeah.
And those stress hormones go into the uterus too. So the babies are also soaking up maybe cortisol or norepinephrine, epinephrine, all these stress hormones. So it's very interesting. And also then, so then when once the baby's born and is relinquished for adoption and is handed to a stranger, you can almost imagine that the heart rate being held, you know, heart to heart for soothing feels differently than the heart in utero. The breath with this stranger feels different than the breath in utero. So it's a real shock to the baby's system.
Whoa. This is even deeper. And this is not anything I hadn't heard, but I wasn't even thinking of it, processing it through the eyes of adoption. So now you have that baby, that child, experiencing one thing, then they're born, then even let's say they're blessed to be adopted shortly thereafter. Um,
One day, 2 hours,
Big
it doesn't
change.
matter.
Yeah.
And the parents are wondering, why is the baby just not responding to all this love and attachment I want to give this baby? Well, it's going to take a little adjustment. It's going to take, and when before our podcast, you said adaptation or adoption. And I
Oh
said,
yeah.
let's go with
Wait.
adoption.
So for clarity, when we said you mentioned what we might talk about today, I didn't know if it was adapting or adoption, but both words apply to each other,
For
right?
sure, for sure.
Right.
And then the adoptive parents are often nervous and excited, and maybe they have pressure that they have to be better than average parents, right? And so when the baby's responding in what I would think would be logical ways, it's um it's sometimes surprising to the adoptive parents that the baby's just not like going along with all of this. But the
Mm,
baby has to adjust and the baby has to grow into this new attachment. And it's possible and it happens all the time. It's a wonderful situation. So the adoptive parents' feelings could get hurt, but they're the adults. So they have to be educated about this and maybe go through some therapy about this, not to like play out their personal rejection about this when a baby doesn't take to them right away.
how often for the adoptive child do things come up in your experience later in life? They could be 40 and they're maybe get triggered by something and now they're still wrestling, or they are maybe even for the first time, with the whole adoption situation. Is that fairly common too?
Yes, it's common. I mean, not all of my clients are adopted, but we can say every client, when you were talking about loss at the beginning, every client has to work through attachment wounds, whatever that is. I mean, in high school, we have to read all those classics. And what are they about? They're about loss of innocence, they're about rites of passage. So, but for every person who comes here, no matter what age, I don't care if the child is 3 years old or 33 years old, it just doesn't matter. If they are adopted, this is going to be a facet, a huge foundational facet of getting to the roots of what is going on today. What is fueling today is the foundation. And we talk about that all the time on these
Sure.
our conversations, right? You know, um, and it's complicated. And it's reactive because the child is naturally reacting and the parents are reacting and it becomes a mess until they can regulate themselves and allow themselves to understand the science around this, that this is a nervous system to nervous system.
Can we look at it in a couple of different ways? Let's say you have adoptive children and they're either, now they're more aware they're tweens, let's say, 11, or they could be 15, somewhere in there where there's more
Yep.
awareness. Are there things you should be doing as a parent? Where am I going with that? For example, a lot of parents of adopted children do gotcha day. They call it gotcha day. That's the day I gotcha.
Yeah.
That when you were handed to me in my arms, and you were only 6 months old, whatever it might be. Things like that. Are there suggestions, or even the conversations that they have with their children?
Yes, I mean, if you're talking about tweens, so Gotcha Day might be established the very first year and then on throughout a child's life. But I think that one of the most beneficial things to happen for children, so there are two aggressive growth times in our lives, right? We grow aggressively through infancy, toddlerhood to early childhood. Then we grow aggressively to prepubescence through adolescence. Those two periods of times are aggressive growth spurts. And for me, all throughout this, parents have to uh, be proactive in discussing, normalizing. Well, what if a child comes home from school from an everyday situation, but my adopted child has a bigger reaction to this? We have to be proactive to be able to say, maybe deep, deep in your body, you remember the shock to your system that happened at relinquishment, or you are wondering and churning in your nervous system, who am I, or where do I belong? And and if we can be open and proactive about normalizing these conversations, or even if our child has a big negative reaction to something, to be able to say, oh, your nervous system got triggered by something that deep down you may remember implicitly or explicitly. I mean, these are the things that it's not so much like have a party on Gotcha Day. And I've worked with kids who are 6 years old and they've heard all their lives they're adopted, but they don't know what it means. And the parents don't want to talk about, well, your birth parents had to relinquish you, and
Okay.
we wanted to start a family.
Should you, at 6, start those conversations early?
Yes,
Kind of knew you were going to say
yes,
that.
yes, yes. You should start it at age 3, age 6, age whatever
Mm.
it is. Even holding an infant. Oh my goodness, you went through a little shock to your system. You know, your birth mommy and birth daddy loved you, but couldn't take care of you in the village, and we're fortunate enough to have you. These are narratives, and then help your children write a narrative about themselves. once upon a time, like a fairy tale, but not a fairy tale, a reality story. Like once upon a time, you were born, I was born, whoever the adopted child is. And I have a lot of great, healthy, adaptive things in my life, like A, B, and C. And I had challenges in my life. I was given up for adoption, and that was a shock to my system. And here we are developing a narrative that's adaptive and healthy and straight, no secrets. No, I don't want to talk about that. When you talk about who are your birth parents, I feel afraid you'll leave me, baby, child, teenager,
Mm.
25-year-old. You know, that's just not that's not conducive for our adopted children to flourish. Does that make sense?
100%. And I'm so glad we're talking. I want to make sure we get to one other point here. Got a couple of minutes left.
Okay.
And here it is.
Okay.
First of all, thank you very much for identifying what happens in utero and the traumas that we experience. It's real. Nobody ever talks about that, but that's internalized, and that's the seed has been planted. That comes up later in life. That being said, adopted children, abandonment issues, fear
Yes.
thereof. I'm
Yeah.
sure that comes up in your practice, right?
Yes, for sure. Just like the nature of friendships and relationships, let alone with mom and dad. Abandonment issues are the deep-seated ones, and that comes back to loss
Hmm.
and the fear of loss. And then how are we going to be about it? Are we going to hurt you before you hurt me? That's one type of relationship or friendship that we may see play out.
Yep.
Are we going to do anything to continue to gain your approval and your love and acceptance, whether it's a friend or family or parents? Or, are we going to, I mean, there are other choices too. When you need me, am I going to push you away? And when I need you, am I going to pull away? This push and pull. I don't know if I worded it quite accurately just now, but abandonment is loss. Abandonment is fear of loss, and that's where we started,
Mm.
which is interesting.
Prenatal trauma. I mean, it's
I mean,
new, but nobody
I
talks about
ask
it.
all my, I ask all my clients, I don't even care if they're 4 years old, what happened when you were born or even before you were born? Sometimes a little kid can tell me, my parents were fleeing the country, or my parents were moving from this country to America. And I say to them, can you imagine the stress they were experiencing? Because they have to know that they experienced their parents' stress.
I Final thing here I want to share with you. My parents got divorced when I was very young. They were already getting divorced before I was even born. So there was a lot of stuff going on there in the very beginning. I did a woo alert, people, woo alert. I did a past life regression over the summer.
Oh, that's great.
And the question was, as I was being, timeline going back, now I'm in mom's womb. And I was asked, what was your mom feeling? And I had an idea, but I tried to get out of my head and feel it. And I had to, and much of what
Body.
took place during that regression, even before I was born in another life, if you will, put that to the side, the emotion was real. And even what my mother experienced, I was feeling it, feeling it. So for me, that's validation that this stuff is real, that this does work. And
Our bodies hold memory
there you go.
and ancestral memory. Like, don't forget the whole DNA thing that happens in ancestry. Yeah, that gets passed on.
And even, the side note, I visualized in the regression under hypnosis, another life. And, I try to get in my mind like, all right, come on. Are you just making that up? Like you're making up this whole, like watching a movie. I'm in a farm and there's a horse and which is what it was.
But it's your ancestry.
But the emotion I felt was real.
Yes.
There's no way I could have made that up. And
Yeah.
and the same thing, in
It's ancestry.
prior to
Yeah,
being born.
no, this is really great.
Yeah.
And then now we're going back to adoption. It's a loss of some of that too until people reclaim it or gain it, but they need support and openness and a non-threat about it. Like, I'm all in. Of course you should know yourself.
This is what you do. This is why it's so important and impactful for therapy. To give somebody, whether it's the parents or the children adopted, the tools to deal with this and actually have these realizations. It took me time to figure this out, but now I see it, and you just started talking about it today, prenatal, what you're feeling, what the child is experiencing. We're listening the entire time. It's not
The
like
nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It really is. Oh,
I mean, our
gosh.
systems are fascinating too, but the idea is, why would we be threatened to understand ourselves better or help our children understand themselves or help myself understand my experience better? Why would that be a threat? We have to open up to all this. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Talk to a therapist. That's what I mean. To realize this is where I figured it all out, and now I'm seeing it's all backed by science. Your website is your name, Susan Engel LCSW.com, correct?
Correct, Amundo.
Yeah, and Susan, obviously spelled as it sounds, Engel, Engel. You can work with people on many different capacities, pretty much anywhere virtually, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Always wonderful talking with you. You validated a ton for me today, like in terms of, well, I don't think we've ever really talked about what children experience before being born. And that's why they say it's so important. Talk to your baby, put on music and all. Now, I heard it. I didn't
Regulate
really.
yourself.
Yes.
No matter what you're going through, regulate yourself so that you're not dumping stress hormones.
Yes.
Ooh, it's a big deal.
It
Anyway,
really is. Thank you so much for today. A topic that needed to be discussed. So important. So much going on there on both sides, the parent and the children.
yes, the birth parents, the adoptive parents, and the children
Thank you for that too.
and family.
Yeah. Always love talking with you. Thank you for today.
Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate it. All right. We'll be right
you.
back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.